Here, if someone's up here speaking, absolutely nobody else is speaking. That's the deal, or there's the door. We're here to get business done, and that's it. So if someone's up here speaking, quiet. Thank you.
Well, I'd hate to live at his house. Room. There we go. Right by my face. As Brian said, we'd really appreciate it if we give everybody a chance to talk if we need to talk. We're really here to talk about information sharing tonight. This is a pretty emotional issue, right? I mean, everybody in the room knows that. I can tell you we had 25 or so people at my house about a month ago, and we all talked, and this is something that's very emotional to a lot of people. Our goal is to get information, right? To know and understand the issue first, and then we can make a good decision second. So I appreciate everybody coming out. My name is Mary Draves. My husband Todd and I live on the west side of Wixom Lake off the Tobacco River. We're neighbors with John Seidenstreicher and Jerry Whittington. We live on Flock Road. We've been on the lake for about 15 years. And obviously this is a pretty big issue for us too, right? Because we all have a very large investment in our homes. I just want a couple housekeeping agenda items. Everybody should have got an agenda, and we'll kind of go over that, just what we're going to talk about, information sharing. The other thing is everybody should have got a Wixom Lake Association application. If you have not joined the Wixom Lake Association, please strongly consider it. It's going to be very important that we as a community have an umbrella organization like the Wixom Lake Association to speak on potentially our behalf if we so choose, but it's important that we're all together, okay? So please consider joining. It's a $25 fee? And you have to come to all the meetings, that's what Larry said. Oh no, I'm not going. Anyway, we also have, I just tentatively set a next meeting on April 18th at 7 p.m. as long as the folks in Billings Township say that's okay. And I got a nod from the chief in the back. Thank you. So we'll do this again in about a month. The intent is, again, information sharing. You've got an opportunity on the paperwork that I gave you to write questions down. We really need to know what people want to know so we can go find the information, okay? Just to kind of quickly go down the agenda and tell you the topics here. We're going to introduce those from from our local governing bodies. I think we've got a lot of township supervisors and trustees and treasurers, members of the Wixom Lake Association Board, so we'd like to make sure everybody knows who you are. And then we're going to talk about, hopefully Pete Posniak's here. Brian, where are you? Oh, there you are. Lost you. Okay, well, Pete was supposed to be here tonight to talk about the bond issue, and Brian's going to talk a little bit about that, the idea of bonding and what's that mean. And then assessments. I mean, we all do the weed assessment, but how does an assessment work? Myself and Greg Stryker, I think a lot of you know Greg from Stryker's Marina on the lake. We have talked with Mr. Mueller a few times in the last month about various things. I just want to kind of give you some information on those conversations. I've been in contact with the Sanford Lake Association on a very regular basis. They've been kind enough to invite me to all of their discussions on the issue on Sanford Lake, and then also been very gracious in making sure that whatever they're going to do, I know about. So I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on there. And then we'll have a time for how to discuss a little bit about how we want to engage with the Wixom Lake Board. I think there's an opportunity there. And then do we actually charter a focused task team on this? A smaller number of people that we say, they volunteer, right, Larry? Yeah, volunteering, unpaid, to go and spend 20 hours a week on this. Because it needs it. On the bottom of your agenda, there are resources of interest. There's a Dropbox. For those of you who are online a lot, Brian's been so kind to set up a Dropbox. That has a lot of information, and I highly encourage you to go read it, okay? There's some stuff in there about a dam in another part of the country that has a very similar problem that we do. There's also a study that we just put in today about the economics of why you would have a lake, and I think that's very important as we move forward. There's also letters, correspondence, etc. in there that I think you just need to read, okay? And don't take my word for it, go look at it for yourself. The other thing on the bottom of there is a Sanford Lake Association website address, the Wixom Lake website address, the FERC address, for those of you who are interested in understanding what the FERC guys do, because this is important in this particular case, there's their address. And then if you go on the Sanford Lake Association, the Sanford Lake Preservation Society, or Association, which is a group that's dealing specifically with the dam issue on Sanford Lake. You can access their website from the Sanford Lake Association website, but there is a tremendous amount of information, volumes of documents and letters and correspondence that you can take a look at and formulate your own opinion about things. Okay, that being said, if I could, I know this can take a little bit, but I think it's important for everybody in the room to know. I know we have township officials here, elected officials, and I wondered if you wouldn't mind just standing up and you could introduce yourself so we know where you're from. So Brian, maybe you might want to lead the charge.
I'm Brian Johnson. I'm a township trustee for Billings Township. I live in the community. I'm building a house on the lake. This is going to affect more than just on the lake people. This is going to affect the whole county. So I guess with that said,
any other township officials? I know John, you're here. We got a supervisor in the back, so if you could just either stand up and introduce yourself.
Larry Nelson, treasurer of Billings Township.
Carmelot, Billings Township trustee.
Great. Wixom Lake Association Board, we'd like to see you too.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Rose Malott, I'm Wixom Lake Association Treasurer.
Great, thank you.
I'm Chris Phillips, Wixom Lake Board.
Thanks for coming. John, are you going to stand up and introduce yourself? I'm going to keep picking on you till you do.
Bill Clark, Tobacco Township Supervisor.
Thanks for coming, Bill. John?
I'm not elected, I'm the zoning administrator.
Close enough.
Tobacco Township.
Any other township officials? Jim. In the back?
Billings Township Clerk.
Thanks.
There you go, Billings Township Supervisor.
Any other township officials here?
Colin Combs, Secor Township Supervisor.
Oh, great.
Karen Hoffman, Clement Township.
I'm sorry, what was your township?
Karen Hoffman, Supervisor, Clement Township.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Brian, we got a special guest, expert guests, I should say.
Pete Posnack, our township attorney.
Okay, we have asked Pete a couple of things tonight too. Pete, thanks for coming. Pete's a staple in the township attorney business. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is at our last meeting we talked a little bit about a bonding issue. One of the things obviously that's a big deal for this is funding, right? How are you going to get the cash to pay for the work? And we talked about the idea of a bonding ordinance, so that nothing could start until we knew that the funds were secure. And Brian did a little research on that. You didn't?
The research I did,
Well,
I spoke to Pete about it, and I think he will speak on it, about the bond issue and special assessment, whenever there's
it's right
on
now.
the agenda.
It's right now.
Pete? No? Are you ready?
As we would say at my house, now, Pete. Yes?
Have him talk in the mic, we
Yeah.
couldn't hear him.
Okay, great. We'll make sure he talks right in the microphone. Come right up here if you'd like, Pete. Thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot so soon, but we don't mess around.
Hello, my name is Pete Posnack. I'm a lawyer. I have an office in Midland. I've been involved in representing townships and units of government for a long time. I have also been involved in the creation of special assessment districts for various purposes. I'm familiar with the process. I'm familiar with how they're financed, etc. I'm also a lifelong resident of this area. And in my 35 years of practice, I have come across various issues associated with Sanford, Wixom, and all of the lakes. I'm well aware of how they were set up. Brian had provided to me a notebook with a bunch of stuff, including kind of a timeline of the history of Frank Wixom and all of the FERC projects, etc. And I'm likewise familiar with that. Brian also asked me if I could, in anticipation of some questions, address a couple of things. The first, let's take the easier part. And please, you have to understand that what I'm about to say can only speak in generalities. I can't get down to the specifics of how much, what the payments would be, interest rate, any of that. Nor do I have the ability to assess the internal finances of Boyce Hydro to address the question whether or not Boyce Hydro generates sufficient cash to fund the improvements that are necessary. I have no idea. But therefore, and there's also in this countless different competing interests associated with whatever happens. And so with that, I have to give that as the disclaimer in terms of what I can do. The state of Michigan has a group of statutes. Billings Township, I know, has a sewer district and a special assessment district set up for that, and issued bonds associated with the creation of that sewer assessment district. That same statute is available for construction and maintenance of dams for recreational purposes. So if the same statute is available for Billings Township, it is likewise available for Secord, Tobacco, and the other townships that are, whose names I heard in the introductions. Now, there is also a statute which also authorizes lake improvement boards. There is one that I know of in Midland County, I'm sure Jim knows about it, associated with the Sanford Lake Improvement Board. That is the group of statutes that allows, and maybe it's done here, it is something different than what I think is the Wixom Lake Homeowners Association. It is a statutorily created body which its usual purpose is to fund weed eradication. It is most done on Sanford Lake with regard to weed eradication. But the same statute, in my opinion, would allow the ability to make improvements to create or improve the lake itself. So the mechanism is there. Now, what is an assessment district? An assessment district creates, at the end of the day, a pot of money which can be spent for a particular project. The literature that I've been provided uses round numbers. Someone's opinion is that it's $8 million worth of improvements that are necessary. And as I'm reading it, the $8 million is associated only with the Edenville impoundment and dam. I don't know if there's other numbers associated with Sanford. I knew that there were some improvements done several years ago in Sanford. So let's assume for the sake of this discussion that the contractors are hired and it cost $8 million. The contractors, from what I was looking at, would be over and done with in 18 months. The thing that I saw was a discussion of a drawdown in, I think, 14 or beginning in 13 to allow access to do shoring up work. So whatever that time period is to do it, 18 months or so, that contractor is going to want to be paid as they go and be gone. But you can't take an assessment district and you don't want to, maybe you do, depending on what the numbers are, create an assessment district which would assess everybody a proportional share of the $5 million or $8 million in 1 year. It could be spread out for a period of time. So the assessment district would be set up. The assessment district would then create a stream of money over a period of years. can go a long time. I would suggest that depending upon how the numbers would work out, you'd want to do it as quickly as possible. It creates the income stream, which then allows the township or the county of Gladwin can do it if they are in agreement, to issue their bonds, sell $5 million worth of bonds, get the cash, and then it can be used for one of the approved purposes, pay the contractors in their 18-month period. Then the bonds are paid off, and the money is paid back over a period of time from the assessments. Who can be assessed? The the properties who can be assessed are those which receive a benefit from the improvements that are being done. The easy ones would be the lakefront property owners. Among the stuff I saw was a survey that had been done that asked people to respond, are you a backlotter? The backlotters can be assessed, as can a certain distance away from the lake itself. I would offer an example of a party store who may, that if there is one, who may be a mile away, but sells a lot of beer and picnic supplies on the way to the state park. So it can extend further than that. Likewise, it would be appropriate and legal for the municipalities themselves to pay part of either the assessment or make general fund contributions to pay it. Now, what's done with the $5 million? I'll use an example. $5 million bonds are issued in the year 2013, 2014. The money's received. One would not logically take that money and hand it over to the dam owner. The money would be dispersed, could be dispersed, just like an owner, the township or whoever generated and issued the bonds in the assessment district would have the ability and should monitor the disbursements on an as-work basis. Now, there was this is another concept. Don't mix together the word bond because it has two different meanings. In the one instance of bond that I just spoke of, we talk about a bond or an IOU, an obligation. You and I go to borrow money at the bank, we sign a promissory note for the car. In the municipal business, when municipalities borrow money, they issue a bond. The other context of the bond that Brian had talked to me about was the type of bond, it's a performance bond, where someone posts the bond, the purpose of which is to ensure that the project is done. Now, it is my opinion that it is difficult, if not impossible, to say to Boyce Hydro, you have to put $5 million in a bond before you begin the construction work. I don't believe that a local unit of government could tell Boyce Hydro that they have to post a bond of $5 million before they begin the work. Any contractor who contracts with them might want to have the bond, but I don't believe the township can force them to post a bond for work that's done on their own private property. There is some discussion and one of the reasons I say that is because the confines of the lakes are part of the project as defined by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There is a concept of preemption. The concept, and it's a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. As you stack up laws in terms of the hierarchy, the highest on the food chain, well, the second highest on the food chain, is going to be the laws created by the federal government, which would be above the laws created by the state and above the laws created by a local unit of government. In those instances where the federal law says that it is superior. And in the area of the regulation of FERC-related projects, the federal law and FERC agency reigns supreme over the state and over the townships in areas which would affect the ability of the power plant to operate. You, the local unit of government, could not get involved in something which hinders the ability or makes more difficult the ability of the plant to make power. That's an easy one. You are not preempted in areas where the local regulation does not affect the ability to make power. And where between ability to make power, not ability to make power, where the line is drawn is a gray area. A restriction with regard to the bonding. You FERC-related facility don't have a bond requirement, and I don't know this for sure, with FERC in order to do improvements. But we, the local units, are now imposing that financial requirement upon you. Here's the response. The local unit of government is interfering with our ability to maintain and capitalize our project by imposing an additional financial obligation. I could be wrong, because therein lies the details of FERC, but my general understanding is that as I stand here right now, and again I'm going back to the generalities, is that I think it would be difficult, if not legally impossible, to impose a requirement on the hydro plant for the capital improvements associated with what they have to do in order to shore up those dams. The contractors that they hire may feel different, but that's probably would be permissible for the contractors to do that. Did I miss anything?
Oh, that was the questions I had. The other one was on us actually loaning the money to Boyce, but that's you said that's not something that the township set up to do, or county.
Yeah. If you extend this all the way through, then assessment district is set up. Assessments are confirmed. $5 million is borrowed. Who you borrow it from? You borrow it from USDA might buy the bonds. They might be purchased by people here about municipal bonds. Well, I recommend buying municipal bonds. Well, that's what this is, municipal bond. That is the state, that is the government's lending of its credit. It's giving a note, giving a bond, giving its financial obligation. The state cannot lend its credit for the benefit of private business. You can't use the township or government's credit in order to borrow the money to turn around and lend to private enterprise. You're not a bank. You frankly, though, can give it to them in order to shore up the dams. Now the question becomes, and part of what I was reading, is that, you give them the money, they build the dam. What's to prevent them from they fixed the dam was to prevent them 2 years from now, saying there's, need more money. Now the one in Sanford needs a bunch of money. And the one in Sanford, same problem. It's deteriorating, needs more money. Therein would lie the conditions that would have to be negotiated with Boyce Hydro before you even got into the process. It would not be uncommon to frankly start asking for some management control. If you're gonna be a partner with them and use the money to shore up the dam, it wouldn't be an unreasonable request to say that there has to be some management associated with it as well. One of the emails that I saw on the survey was, would you be interested in essentially acquiring an ownership interest in the dam? That may very well be the most logical, direct way to control the future of the investment that was made. And without getting into the details, I'm relatively sure that if it was all negotiated, there could be some measure of control with regard to the hydro company associated with the government. But frankly, they'd have to agree to it. They'd have to agree to put in a control situation a representative of the government. I'd love to open it up for questions, but I don't know if I...
Well, I have a couple of questions. In terms of the assessment, could you, and this is just for clarification, we all heard the issue of what an assessment is, how you develop it. For those of us who live on Wixom, we do have a weed assessment, right, in tobacco and a couple other townships. If an assessment already exists, could you modify that assessment district to include something else or to be for something else also, or would you have to go and have a new assessment district made?
You would have to, that Lake Improvement Board statute says that you have to, you can't just unilaterally say all of a sudden, instead of collecting $125,000 in 2013 for weed control, we want to collect $600,000 for purposes of paying off a bond. My recollection of the way that statute works is you have to annually publish or provide a hearing on your budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And then you would then be confined to the assessments and to the distributions that are set forth in that.
So a new assessment district, so we're all clear, would have to be something that you would do by statute, voted on by the people in the community? I mean, explain that to me.
Sure. It is not a decision premised upon a vote going to the general or primary election to vote on it. It is under, I'll use the sewer statute as the example. Under the sewer statute, the process is initiated, can be initiated by the various township boards, and there would have to be cooperation among all of the townships with surrounding an immense amount of cooperation and an agreement among all of the townships with what to do with the details of the money. It could be initiated by the township board, subject to the filing of objections by 20% of the land area involved in the assessment district, which then, if those objections were filed, would require greater than 50% of the land areas to file a petition. So essentially, it can be begun by, in a particular township, by as few as 3 members of the township board, being a majority. They could kick it off, and then if nobody files the objections, it could go from start to finish. If there are objections of 20% of the landowners, then 50% of the landowners have to put down a bigger card or put down a petition. And, you know, we're talking thousands of landowners, I think, overall. I don't know what the split is by townships.
I think the gas is about 4,000.
Yeah,
Parcel on the lake.
Yeah. That's what
yeah,
north of the Eagle.
yeah. So that's how that starts. And then with regard to the existing improvement board, if it's a statutorily created improvement board, the concept of using the money for dam improvements as opposed to the weed control has got to be put in the budget, and there's got to be hearings on it up front.
Be very specific on how we can assess for the lake improvement boards. And our assessments is set on a 4-year, it's not on a 1-year basis.
Yeah. But you have a budget in advance.
Yeah, well, we're
What it's
budgeted
gonna be.
4 years,
Yeah.
4 years in advance after that. So.
Yeah.
Repeat the question, we can't hear you.
Yeah, if you could repeat it and then
Sure.
answer it there.
This is Jim Lykia. He's one of our Midland County Commissioners. And are you on the Sanford Lake Board?
No, I just got off of it. I'm on the Wixom Lake Improvement Board.
Okay, okay. But what he said is that the budgets are set on the improvement board on 4-year cycles.
Great.
And so you only have to have the budget hearing once every 4 years. Yeah. And you could amend it, I suppose, and then bring forth at another hearing the new concept of adding the dam improvements.
Yeah, do we have any other questions? Maybe take one or two.
We'll take 1 or 2 questions to clarify what Pete just talked
I've
about.
got a question, ma'am.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's something here that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, it's not a dam improvement, and it's not a dam repair. It was told to us by Boyce Hydro that this is a dictate from FEMA about this 1,000-year flood that they're expecting. Now, that's the way it was explained to me. Boyce Hydro said there is absolutely nothing wrong with the dams. Are you aware of that?
I don't know the condition of the dam.
That's what Boyce Hydro told us.
Yeah, I think, I hear what you're saying. I think that's probably, we got some other information to share with you, and we can maybe address that in the next part.
Alright.
Yeah, do you have a question though about the assessment or the
This is
way
the
that?
first I've heard about the assessment.
Well, this is more of an information. I'm not saying, I mean, this is not a, there's gonna be an assessment, but just so we're all
Okay,
educated.
the other thing,
Yeah.
if you're talking about assessments
Yeah.
of money, is Boyce Hydro told us at the meeting, and it was the meeting not last fall, but the year before that,
Sure.
that they were gonna furnish all the money and weren't to worry about getting a job half done and then them running out of money. That's what they told us, so.
Oh, and I would respond to one thing, is that before you went down this route, before you got involved with this whole process, you know, I think that before you get involved in any of this assessment process or go through the boards or anything, people have got to be satisfied of, one, the need for the expenditures in the first place, and two, the need for any kind of financial assistance to make them happen.
Okay, good. Bill, you had a question?
Well, I wrote a letter to FERC in January asking whether they required bonds. If not, could we do it? What's the limitations on our authority? Because Boyce kind of thinks that we're outside the scope. I never did get a written response yet, but I talked to the deputy director. And she said they don't require bonds, but if state law allowed it, we could, as far as they're concerned. They require them to get all local permits, including township permits, with the exception that if it takes too long to get the permit, or FERC considers it excessive, then they can override that requirement. But in general, they have to get it. Even Boyce acknowledges they need DEQ permits to do this work.
Yeah.
And I met with Frank Starkweather last week. He's working for Boyce Hydro. In essence, it was the start of their public relations campaign. In fact, I got a message from him today, he wants to meet with the township supervisor. Because in our discussion, I said, in my opinion, the first step was to open their books and show us they can't get a construction loan. And convince the residents that the money is absolutely necessary. And they're going from, we can't get the money, to tearing the dam down. Nothing in between. Like trying to sell it, or the fact that it would cost them more than $8 million to tear it down, that kind of thing.
Yeah, good. I'm sorry, Pete. I'm glad to hear that he did contact you. Greg and I have actually met Frank also, and I think it's a good first step that, you know, they start. The big question is what's the cash flow situation, right? And out of the documentation that many of us have seen, and I know that I see a lot of faces in the room who've looked at a lot of documentation, you can't really tell. Okay? Am I summarizing that correctly, Greg? Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't got that far.
Yeah.
But
We really can't comment on the financial stability of Boyce Hydro. I mean, I don't know, because, you know, they don't have to show us their books, so, you know, it would be good if they could. So I'm glad to hear that he's contacted the township supervisors. Are there any more questions about the issue of what it means to do a bond and what it means for a special assessment? Yes, sir.
I have a comment about the bond.
Okay.
And certainly, as the lawyer in the group, I'm not challenging anything you said. I just want to point something out I was personally involved in. Where a township was allowed to insist upon a bond with a contractor. Okay? It was for a sand filtration system for our development. Okay? And because of the fact that the township proved there would have been a financial hardship that they could not have owned up to if that contractor defaulted. We were allowed to require a bond large enough that if the system failed and the contractor wasn't around, it would cover all the costs to go to the closest municipal sewer system that was available. It was a very sizable amount of money. It held up. Moose Township, I could give you the information, you know, so I do know it has been done.
Yeah, I mean, if that municipality conditioned the issuance of a permit or the issuance of some land use approval on the construction of those improvements, then bonds happen all the time. But I don't think that the township has, I don't think these townships have currently in place any ordinances or laws which require the impoundments to get site plan or any kind of approval before construction is done on it. And that's part of the distinction that I would draw. Thank you for your comment.
Okay. We want to make sure we kind of get to the agenda, and I don't want to keep anybody here too late, but I appreciate Pete. Thank you very much for coming.
Very well.
We're very lucky to have a seasoned veteran in the township business like Pete. I know my father was a township supervisor for a long time, and I heard Pete's name around the dinner table many times. So. Yeah.
Sometimes
it was all that. No, just kidding. Good. Well, thank you again, Pete. Hopefully that was informative. I don't know about you, but I did learn something about special assessments and bonds. I mean, those are all kind of foreign words to me. The only thing I understand is debits and credits, and I prefer credits. Larry wanted to make a couple comments, and I'm assuming it's to do with Wixom Lake Association. Yeah, quickly, and then we'll get into a discussion that we had, and I think, sir, to your question in the back on with Boyce Hydro regarding their FERC meeting on the 26th and 27th of February.
My name's Larry Woodard. I'm the current president of the Wixom Lake Association, and I just wanted to bring the members that are here now and prospective members up to date quickly on what we've been doing. We've been working on this for about almost 3 years now, getting information. We had Boyce at our meeting 2 years ago, our annual meeting, and they came in, and I have to agree. He said that the money's there, we're going to do this, it's not going to cost anybody anything. I think the big deal was when the drawdown was going to be. Would take all of our summer boating away for 2 years. So to bring you up to date, we have an attorney on our board who has been working diligently for 2 years on this, and to date, we have almost 1,000 pages of Freedom of Information Act information that he's going through. Late last year, there were 15 documents that he felt that were key to finding out finances, finding out what the schedule is going to be, if there was a possibility of moving the drawdown back. And that's one big thing that we would like to see done, is we'd like to see that drawdown done September, October, November, something like that. He, in November, asked for these 15 documents. Boyce protested it. They hired a Washington, D.C. attorney and fought our attorney. They lost. FERC ordered those documents to be released to our attorney. However, they have a 45-day time limit that they can refile their protest. So we're in that time right now, and we expect those documents to be released on the 15th of April, and then our attorney can go forward and start working on what we're looking at. So I just wanted to quick bring you up to date, and we hope that we'll pick up some members here tonight. Actually, we have already, and we hope that the members that are here will continue to support us. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Larry. I think $25 is cheap money to spend on getting with the Wixom Lake Association. I wanted to talk through. Greg Stryker and I have started to have a dialogue with the folks at Boyce Hydro. I can honestly say, I'll just be very candid with you, it's been very interesting. I'm a prolific note taker, and I write everything down that we talk about. And some of those conversations have been productive, some of them have not. So I want to just relay to you, from our last meeting, a bunch of us got together at my house on February 21st to just kind of kick things off and start this type of organization, getting people together to get information out. And one of the things that was really important to this group is Boyce Hydro had what we call a board of counselors, right? Is it board of counselors meeting with FERC, which was held on February 26th and 27th in Las Vegas. So what this board of counselors is that they review Boyce's plan, okay? And this is not for electrical generation, but the plan for the repair of the dams per the FERC regulations, okay? So
repair, it's
well, the upgrade, right, that they have to do. Thank you, Greg. So we had a call with him, and on the call also was his engineer on the project, and Greg and I had not met him yet, Steve Durrett, and he's out of Massachusetts. Mr. Durrett is a hydroelectric engineer, very well known. The guy's he's pretty sharp. Did a little background check on him, and he's very well known. He's very well known in Michigan and Wisconsin and the Midwest. Done a lot of work on dams all over the place. So, when you talk to somebody, you want to make sure their credentials fly, right? So we did take a look at that. He gave us an overview of the regulation and discussed the adaptations that needed to be made to the dam by FERC. And a lot of us have always asked the question, why is he doing this? Well, there's a requirement that FERC has updated their regulations. A lot of these dams were put into place, as we all well know, like 1920s. We are not unique in the need for upgrade on our dam here. And that the FERC has passed a regulation that says you got to have so much water be able to go over that dam per second. So currently, the dam has the ability to pass somewhere in the neighborhood of low 30s, like 31,000 cubic feet per second. FERC regulation said that he had to increase that to 75,000 cubic feet per second. By study and by data collection and gather, Boyce convinced FERC to get that number down to 64,000 cubic feet per second. So the dam has to be able to hold or pass a capacity of water of, ungodly 64,000 feet per second, which is like, we call it the Noah's Ark event. Okay, so last time I heard that happen, a lot of animals died.
It's 4 times what happened in 1986.
Yeah.
The last time we had.
So this is, okay, so everybody remembers the 1986 flood. We were paneling the canoe up to the front of the high school at Dow High. It is 4 times.
Yeah, this will let 4 times the amount of water. I mean, it's a
Okay,
crazy number.
so it'd be like 4 times that water. For those of you who remember the 86 flood, right? That would be 4 times the water that went over top the dam. For those of you who deal with the federal government, no diss intended on our elected officials. They don't always have the best judgment. So the current criteria has been in place since 1940s. It's been updated. The issue, again, as I said, the issue of repair is not really unique to us. Several dams have been impacted by this regulation. If you have on your agenda, there's a Dropbox location. I put some information on a dam in Montana, I believe it was, someplace out west. Very similar problem to us and what happened to that dam and what they did. It's a 4-page document. It's pretty easy read, so I'd highly encourage you to go take a look at it. FERC has been working on this issue. This is what the engineer told us, and I'm not saying that this is law, but they had been working on this with the previous owners. This has been going on with FERC for multiple years. The number I have in my notes is 7. The Board of Consultants, or this group of engineers and technical experts, really is chartered to review Boyce's plans. Okay, so they have to submit it, like we would have to submit a plan for a permit or whatever. This is what we're going to do, and then the FERC guys say, yep, that's okay, or nope, that's not okay. Okay, so he's got some independent engineers and technical experts. It's very common for those of you who deal with government permits, and that's very common to have a kind of a third-party review of what you're going to do. The Board of Consultants has agreed that the plan that Boyce has presented is correct in its design, and it's correct to meet FERC requirements. We just today, Greg got a copy of the report. It's pretty thin. We'll get it out onto the to the Dropbox so you can take a look at it. But in the report it says, indeed, what Boyce has proposed to improve the spillway, to get the water over the dam, is appropriate.
In the time frame, they want June, July, and August.
In the time frame, yeah.
We'll
Okay.
work on that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So, do we have other options in terms of what the FERC has required? At this particular point in time, it will be my judgment the answer is no. This is a regulation and we have to follow it. So, you can try to change the regulation, you can try to do something else legally, but like Pete says, your choices are kind of limited when you're dealing with a federal entity that's just about got as much power as the IRS, in the way I look at them. Nobody's laughing, okay. The other thing I think that's important to understand is that there are 2 options that you could have for repair. Fuse plug, and I'm sure many in this room, I'm sure you guys have heard this. Sanford has a fuse plug. What Boyce is proposing in Edenville Dam is not a fuse plug, but it's actual modifications of those spillways. That's the power dam. This is strictly the spillway. Okay, but if we have a fuse plug like they do in Sanford, and we have an extraordinary water event, there's an issue with operation of the dam, and that fuse plug becomes compromised, your dam will become compromised also. I'm not an expert on fuse plugs. I don't understand the engineering yet. I'm learning. But basically, at Sanford, and I've talked to the guys at Sanford, and they know this, at Sanford, if that fuse plug is compromised, their dam is gone. Okay, their dam is gone. We do not have that situation here. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be relying on a Mother Nature to compromise a fuse plug or something like that. So if the fuse plug's compromised, the dam is compromised. The dam's not there, we don't have the water in the lake. It's a pretty easy chain of events. You might ask yourself, could we do an engineering review on Boyce's system or Boyce's proposal? You could do that. I think that might be money wasted, frankly, because FERC has already approved it, and it would be very difficult for us to go back and say our engineer's smarter than your engineer when they have some of the prominent engineers in the country from my search. So that might be money wasted, but it could be an option. We asked for the report from FERC. We have it now. I mean, we didn't have it before this meeting because my own travel inhibited us to get that, but we will put that in the Dropbox. We encourage you to go read it, and once we work on getting some postings on the Wixom Lake Association site, we can get it up there too. I have tried to make contact with FERC, and I'm glad to hear that they finally responded to you after like 4 months. Very similar to the IRS. Except when you own taxes. So I've tried to make contact with FERC. Lee gave us the name of the engineer that he deals with. He said he's the guy we've been going through this all along with. I've called him, I've emailed him, and he still has not responded to me. So I will keep pestering to try to get him. My intent of contacting him was so that we had a conduit to FERC, and we started, as a community, could build a relationship with FERC. Like any government entity, he who screams loudest gets heard. So I think it's important that we continue to do that, so we will. I also had Dave Camp's office call me. I deal with them on various issues in my real job, and they asked me about this, and they said they are absolutely willing to assist us to send questions in the FERC that we want to have answered. But they said, it would probably be really good if we worked collectively with Sanford, because the problem with FERC is that you sometimes can get 2, 3, 4 different answers, and they may not all say the same thing. which is a little on the scary side, but it's important if we're gonna do that, that we try to work with Sanford. So I think we need to consider, as we put together, kind of maybe if we decide to put together a steering team on this, is that we figure out what questions we want answered by FERC and start sending them letters and keep sending them letters and calling them till we get an answer. Couple other things on this is that I've had contact with a lot of the government representatives, primarily our state senators and our representatives, state representatives. You know, what do we need to do? How are they willing? They're willing to assist us, and we need to tell them what it is that we want from them. I mean, they're willing to find us, to help us find funds or opportunities for appropriations on the state level, etc. I know that on Sanford, they're starting with that process right now to look at available appropriable funds on the state level that they could get to help them with dam repairs. Greg, did I miss anything from that conversation? Do you have anything to add? And you have to step to the microphone.
No, I think you hit it all. I mean,
You sure?
I think the most important thing, does everybody know kind of what's going on? I mean, what the project is that needs to happen in the next year or two?
No.
Bottom line is, we need, the dams need to be able to, the spillways need to be able to run twice as much water through them as what they can right now. The federal government is making the dam owners do it. I mean, they're not budging at all. They don't care about money. They don't care about any of that. He's got to start this project next year. He doesn't have money to do it. And the amount of money, the dam, I haven't seen the exact numbers, but the dam makes about $1 million. And then it's got expenses on top of that. Drop an $8 million project, he's not going to be able to afford to do it. You know, and I don't know what goes on down the road, but bottom line is, he's going to have to start this project in 2014, and there is not funds to do it.
Yeah, has everyone, can I see by show of hands, has anyone in here seen the schedule? Does everyone understand what the schedule is on Wixom right now, the proposed schedule? I see some heads going like this, some heads going like no. Okay, the proposed schedule, and for those in the room, if I get this kind of incorrect, slap me. Next would be this fall, right, 2013? This fall, they would do a drawdown in October of somewhere in the 4 to 6 feet area. Okay, I'm getting 4s in the back of the room, okay? Door number 4, so that would go down for like, something like 3 weeks, wasn't it? 2-3 weeks?
Yes.
I don't know, okay.
15 days.
Okay, and then the proposal is then in the following year that they would start, you know, originally the schedule I saw was drawdown after 4th of July. The last communication I saw was like sometime in June, that they would pull the lake down like 8 feet, right?
Additional?
No, 8 total. Okay, so you go 4 in the fall, you go 8 the following year, and they'd pull that down for...
It'll bring it back up over the early spring.
Yeah.
It'll come back up, and then it's going to go back down.
Yeah,
right now.
Go back, right, it's the schedule sits today, and we know that schedule fluctuates. Go down 8 foot, and then that will be down 6 months, right? June to October, November. Yeah, okay. And that will be construction of spillways and dikes and everything like that.
And then we got to do it again in 2017.
Yeah. You take a break for a couple of years and you do the exact same, repeat the exact same thing in 2017. Pull it down in the fall, next spring, early summer, pull it down for a 6-month period, 4 feet, then 8 feet. The rationale that we've heard and we understand from Boyce and from reading FERC documents that you would pull it down in June, July, and August, whether we agree with it or not, are usually the lowest flow months and lowest rain months. So you'd have the least amount of water moving in the river or through the water system at that time. Okay, yes, Rob, you had a question.
You had mentioned coordinating with Sanford. Is the Sanford dam facing the exact same issue? Is a spillway issue with that dam as well?
The question is what's a Sanford issue? And we've been coordinating with Sanford. Sanford's a little bit different, and I think FERC required. Yeah, Sanford's is a lot of repairs. It's just like repair and maintenance. I mean, our dam is like an overhaul. I mean, it's like, you're ripping it down to the nuts and bolts and redoing it in many cases.
Spillways.
The spillways. To add on to your question, I think this is important to note. When he took the water down to do the repairs that he had to do a couple years ago, right? Everybody remembers this whole big deal and boats and in Sanford. As I understand from the Sanford Lake people, he pulled the water down and FERC said, you got to do this while the water's down at the same time. He said, I don't have the money to do it. And they said, do it. Okay? That's what the folks in Sanford Lake have told me. So I think that, you know, the idea, and I think the prevailing attitude is that he pulled the water down, then extorted the money out of the folks on Sanford Lake, right?
Sanford was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Sanford they had an emergency
Speaking to the microphone.
situation.
Yeah, they had more of an emergency situation because of the failure of some dike walls or something, but.
Their dike was leaking.
Yeah, their dike was leaking, so, okay, I saw a couple other hands, yeah,
Sanford is using a fuse plug.
right,
Yes.
yeah,
And
Sanford
that's
is.
why they're not doing what we're gonna have to do. The fuse plug here would be so large, and it would encounter both sides.
Yeah, you're absolutely
It would
correct.
take a tremendous amount of real estate, and the cost would be pretty high.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, is it worth the difference in the dam?
And if it fails, how a fuse plug
When the
works
fuse
is
plug
it
fails, the object of the fuse plug is if it fails, the water goes out through what that hole is made.
The hole, yep.
It saves the rest of the dam. That's the object of the fuse plug. Now, in the future, then they would come back and hopefully repair that area.
Yeah, that's the
That's not
downside.
necessarily, you don't know what will happen, but that's the design and that's the object of a fuse plug. Not that you lose the entire dam, but you lose a section of the dam, which would then release the water.
Yeah, and then, and to your point, what then do you do in terms of repairing that dam so there's all kinds of issues with that. Yeah, you got, we had one right here in the front, and then I'll get right to you, go ahead.
Yeah, has anyone tried to counter FEMA's, have-to situation with the economic impact of the community?
Well, that's a great comment. The question is have anyone tried to counter FERC's, requirement because of impact to the community, economic impact to the community? One of the things that, I actually talked to Camp's office about that, and I said, look, this is significant hardship, okay? And not only is it significant hardship, the data doesn't net out that we need to be there. If that's a position we want to take, we have to go advocate for that, and that can be rather difficult. I think that one of the things, and we can talk about this from what Sanford's doing, there are funds, I don't know where they are, but we can find them. There are funds that are out there for certain types of projects that the government has set aside. One of the things they're doing is economic analysis about how much money the lake puts back into the community. I think that's a really important piece of data that we need to have on both lakes to counter this argument that we need to go do this. Okay, what's the cost benefit analysis to put in this kind of cash versus what that, and if we don't do it, versus what the lake provides to the community.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm sorry, sir, in the back.
No, it's fine. In your talks with Boyce Hydro,
Yeah.
has their attitude changed now that they don't have the money? Or are they still saying they're gonna pay for the whole thing, but you're worried about that?
Yeah.
They're needing money.
Yeah, I think, yes, in terms of, has your attitude changed? Yeah. I mean, these guys don't have the cash. I mean, they just don't have the money, and they gotta figure out how to do this. In talking with Boyce, and I'm just gonna give you my opinion, right? This is my opinion, and it does not reflect Greg's or anybody else's. Lee Muller does not understand how to present information in a way that everybody in this room can understand. I mean, he's over here sometimes, he's over there sometimes. So my suggestion to him was, we need data, we need information to communicate to the community. The other thing he has a tendency to do is write letters. Anybody seen some of the letters that he's written? Okay, they're shock and awe type letters. And I said, I'm going to just give you a piece of advice from an advocacy perspective. It is stupid to write these kind of letters. I said, they don't make any sense. I said, they infuriate people, they make us all mad, okay? How many of us have read one of those letters and thought, good grief, boom, right? Haven't we? So, my suggestion to him was, please, give us information to inform and educate people. Do not expect anything, right? I mean, the last conversation, I was very blunt with him, and I said, you've got to understand that, you can threaten all you want. I said, but it ain't getting this done any faster, okay? Yeah, I think we had a question here, we'll get right to you, go ahead. I'm sorry, sir, go ahead.
Okay, just my only question is, it's really not about what we've discussed tonight so much as, but does FERC issue a license for Boyce Hydro to operate that dam?
Yeah, he has a license. Yeah.
My follow-up question is, due to your knowledge, is Boyce Hydro in compliance with all FERC's directives?
Okay, so the question was, does he have a license? Yes. That a license expires.
Is he complying with that license?
And the next question is, does he comply with that? I would say the compliance part might be a little on the questionable side.
What about this relationship to the state of Michigan?
That I don't know. I don't really understand, I haven't figured that out yet in terms of the relationship with the state of Michigan. I think they're, you know, the state of Michigan, I don't know if you follow this issue, there's been some publications done, there's a evaluation done on the state level about removing dams, okay? Removing dams for ecological improvement or health of that ecosystem improvement. And I read a report recently that was chartered by a commission, and man, it's probably like a couple cycles ago, that they looked at all the dams in Michigan and said, okay, we would recommend you take out this one, we'd recommend you take out that one, and we can put that report in the Dropbox too. But I just don't have a sense for how the DNR and the DEQ really interface with that. So one more.
My question is, if Boyce Hydro, let's just theoretically say that they're not in compliance with FERC's license requirements, and what happens if they have their license revoked?
Okay, the question is, for everybody who didn't hear him, what if they're not in compliance, and what happens if the license is revoked? I think it's going to take an act of God for them to get their license revoked. I really do. Yeah, it's just, I mean, if he, and then we've seen this through the correspondence, and Greg, if I mischaracterize this, correct me.
Well, he could, in theory, and
Come over here.
I cannot remember the gentleman's last name, was in my office today. Bob, are you in here? If he can lose, or at least the license be revoked if he doesn't follow certain guidelines. One is he's got to have the bottom lands under the water, which in Sanford that's an issue. But up here, if he doesn't, it would be an act of God. But I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and I don't think he knows or anybody knows 100%. If he doesn't do these projects, eventually there's going to be an issue with the license. Then it's very foggy what happens. The FERC could come in and say, okay, we're going to revoke your license, and they might make them lower the water. Now, it's not going to happen forever. I mean, bottom line, there is so much money on Wixom Lake in houses, I can't imagine the state's going to ever let it, but it could be down for a while until someone either buys it, we take over the dams. You know, there's lots of things that could happen, but could he eventually? Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, his license expires in 2024. Okay, and I'll just kind of, for those, just 1 second, I'll explain something. If you look at any of the documentation that's in this Dropbox, Boyce Hydro is part of a trust. Okay, does everybody understand this? Has everybody heard this? I'll kind of explain in generalities. The trust is, this guy's great-grandfather apparently started Boys Life magazine. Anybody remember that? Yeah, I do. Okay, and I'm not that old. What's that?
Boy Scouts.
Yeah. So there's a trust. It's a 100-year trust. At the end of 100 years, that trust has to be cashed out. The assets of Boyce Hydro are part of that trust. Okay, follow my logic? He's going to have to cash out of that trust in 20...
He wants to be done in 10 years.
Yeah, he wants to be done in 10 years, so 2023. Okay, the license expires sometime 2024, 2026. Now he wants to cash out his assets in the dam out of his trust, right? So he's got to make right his investment in the trust from those dams. Now you can surmise whatever you want to surmise from that, but it would be my thinking that if you're the guy who's owning those assets and they're in that dam, you got to figure out a way to get your money out of those assets to get them, get them in the trust and get that cash back in the trust and then cash your trust out. So it's my guess, if he just let the license lapse, and I'm speculating, right? I'm totally speculating. Let the license lapse, wouldn't be any skin off his nose because he's got the cash out of the trust. So the license is a question, but I think that's a longer term issue. Okay, I really do. As Greg said, I mean, what they're trying to do on Sanford is understand how they can, I think, frankly, that the long-term look is how they can become owners of that dam so they know for sure that that thing's still going to be in place.
Mary,
Yeah, go ahead.
The FERC license, just to be clear, the FERC
Rob, come up here. You got it. Okay, can you hear Rob?
Yeah. Speak loud. The FERC license is simply a license to generate electricity off of that dam. Okay, so if he loses his FERC license because he's not in compliance, it does not eliminate the obligation to make the modifications to the spillway. If he doesn't make the modifications to the spillway, then there's going to be requirements to draw the water level down.
Right, good. So, yeah, the license is an issue. It is an issue longer term. Go ahead, you have one more?
Interestingly
We'll get to you, sir. Go ahead.
I had one conversation with somebody from the state who indicates that the likelihood that this body of water, Wixom Lake, Tobacco River, up like takes, say, to Dale Road and up to Highwood Road, the likelihood that the dam would ever be lowered to a point where it would be back to a natural
Flow of river?
is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Will not happen.
I hope not. Cause I'd have a pretty rock wall.
The state
on
would
mud flats.
take measures because the DNR and the DEQ have also some ideas about how public waterways are controlled in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that work in our favor, right? I think, your economic impact, the idea of public waterways, we are a publicly accessible a body of water. There's all kinds of things that work in our favor. And I think we gotta remember all that too, right? I mean, those are really good leverage points for those of us who advocate on a little bit. We have this gentleman way in the back here, he had a comment.
I'm trying to squelch a rumor here. A gentleman with the Michigan State cap on, about 15 minutes ago, got up there and said that the money's there for this project. If I misunderstood him, please correct me.
Yeah, I think you might have.
What I said is Lee Mueller and his engineer was at our annual meeting 2 years ago and put on a presentation, and just like the gentleman back in the Menards sweatshirt remembers, he said, I have the money, we're ready to go as soon as the plans and everything are done, and he put on a big production. That's change, apparently.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't have.
Dollar amounts have gone way up.
Yeah, and the dollar amounts are a lot different. If you start looking at some of the correspondence and the information available, and Larry's got a lot of that too, look in that Dropbox, there's a lot of information. Go on Sanford Lake's website, they post everything from FERC, all his communications. Things are not congruent. Okay, good. Just a couple of things on Sanford Lake. The Sanford Lake Association and the Sanford Lake Preservation Society, they have a steering team, and for those of you who are familiar with the Sanford Lake Association, very similar to the Wixom Lake Association, but they have a group that has been chartered to deal with the dam issue on Sanford Lake. I know a lot of those guys, I deal with them on other things, and they've been really good about, they keep me totally in the loop, and everything that they talk about we bring to the meetings here. Sanford's advancing an economic study, as I mentioned earlier when you asked the question about what kind of economic impact we provide, and I think it's substantial. When we start looking at how you're going to fund this, so it's not out of our pockets but out of somebody else's, that's going to be an important piece of data to have. So they are actually coordinating an effort to put together that economic analysis. They have some people on Sanford that are going to fund that, and that's about a $40,000 price tag. Okay, so township officials in the room, I think you might want to consider, we might want to consider joining them on that and just extending the study. Economies of scale when you're doing work like that are very important, and then extend that study to Wixom Lake so that we have a really thorough economic evaluation of what kind of cash that we provide back into the community. That would include, people like Greg, our friends at Edenville Market, the marinas, all the industry that we see from the lake. So I think that's something we want to, talk about as a smaller group and then understand how we could fund that. But that's really important. Sanford's also working on an advocacy strategy with regulators. They've got some ability to, they're not looking for the same kind of money we are. So they're looking at going and asking for appropriations through their particular state representatives. I think that's an option that we will have too. They're meeting Monday with their attorney, and I've been invited to join that meeting, so I will take copious notes and see where they're going. But I think that's an important thing to keep in contact with the Sanford Lake Association, and we may want to invite them, to one of our discussions and hear what they have to say. A little bit different situation there, right? They're not dealing with as many dollars as we are. Okay. Anything else that you have? Okay. I think at this point we're on number 8. Anything else that anybody want to share? Oh, way in the back. Okay. Oh, I didn't see you. Oh, he's behind the pillar. Okay. Sorry about that. See, I'd make a bad politician.
Somebody asked if Boyce had any problems with FERC, and the answer to that is, according to some of the documentation that is on the internet, yeah, they have had, and part of the dam issues with Sanford, Edenville, and so on are the result of those differences, and the conference and the meeting that they had in Vegas was a partial resolution to those. So the problems are ongoing. You ask about the differences that they had with DNR and DEQ. Oh, yeah, they got a lot of them. They opened up public fishing sites and public recreation sites in areas where they weren't supposed to. They closed sites that they weren't supposed to. They closed parking areas that were DNR controlled and they weren't supposed to. Those issues are also being addressed. The drawdown, according to a letter from FERC to Debbie Stabenow,
Is that dated November last year?
I'm sorry?
Is that one dated November last year?
Yeah.
Yep.
One date was changed, or is in the process, I guess, of being changed, but the drawdown was scheduled for 4 feet in the fall of this year, starting in November, and that continues into the early part of next year. The spring drawdown was 8 feet, starting the spring of next year, and originally that was scheduled to continue through the summer of next year, but apparently all hell broke loose because that was going to wipe out the entire summer. So that went back into renegotiations because somebody pointed out that Boyce was doing that just to get back at the folks on Wixom and those who were raising a bit of sand. The one for the next one was 8 feet in the spring of 2017, and the dates for that have not been set yet. Those were to depend on how the construction project was going and the results of it. Another question that was raised by some of my neighbors, Boyce is in the business of generating hydroelectric power. That dam is his business. That dam is a piece of capital equipment in his business. Why doesn't he have to repair his own capital equipment?
I could probably clear a lot of this up. And I could have spoke earlier
It's neat.
on this.
It would be neat for any businessman to be able to say to the people who are his customers, hey, look, folks, you know, it's nice you buy your goods from us. I also want you to help pay for my freezers and my lights and all of the other stuff that I have in my business.
I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, that's a, you know, I understand your point. My husband and I own a business too. We don't ask people to capitalize our business.
Anyway.
Yeah, but good comments, and I'm glad you're reading all those letters, because they are great. They're super boring.
This is just a separate issue, but if the drawdown takes place and the FERC indicates that they want to have the drawdown as part of the repair project, let's just take it a step further. Since 1925, there's been flooded wetlands that were created, and they're like 75 years old. I will be willing to bet you that the EPA, the DNR, the state of Michigan, and the DEQ will have real interested feelings about removing those wetlands.
Oh, I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would. Commissioner Liger had a couple comments he wanted to make, and I think we appreciate him coming, and I do want to apologize in advance. I missed you and all the elected officials. Next time I won't, I promise. Okay, good.
Most of you probably don't realize what we have went through in Midland County on this very issue. And so I think it's very necessary that you understand our dilemma down there, and maybe it will help you in your problems that you have up here. Years ago, Boyce Hydro refused to pay taxes on 24 parcels of land that's underneath the water. This gentleman asked about compliance with FERC. He would not comply with FERC because them 24 parcels establish flow rights to the Sanford Dam. It is required by FERC that the owner of that dam has control of them 24 parcels of property that we foreclosed on. Now, my constituents in Midland County have been paying his $6,000 in taxes for 5 years now. Ever since he refused to pay the taxes on them 24 parcels, my constituents has had to pay that tax, and we do every year. So that should answer the questions about compliance with FERC. This gentleman has no intentions at all of complying with FERC, unless he's made to by the law. So
we have to understand that these 4 dams are an LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. Now, I was hoping that Pete would hit on that. You cannot go after Boyce Hydro in its entirety. We have to deal with these 4 dams, this LLC, because Boyce Hydro has protected themselves by getting this to be an LLC. And so it's actually separate from their other businesses. But you have to understand that when he refused to pay the $6,000 a year taxes on them 24 parcels, he was spending tremendous amounts of money over here on the dikes and below the spillway in Edenville over here, and he was holding back $6,000 to pay his taxes on them 24 parcels that establish flow rights to that dam, which is a FERC requirement. So I hope that that helps everyone here understand who we're dealing with here. This is not a rational way of doing things as we would consider rational. I mean, it's a shame that my constituents is having to pay this for $6,000. It's really a real sore spot with me. But that should give you somewhat of an idea of who you're dealing with here. This is very, very difficult. And we can't believe that FERC hasn't required that man to own that property and to pay them taxes on that property.
Jim, just had a question, I want to have a question on that, because
Yeah, this is a pretty complex issue in Midland. You guys foreclosed on the property, correct? And then now do you lease that property back, or what happens?
We own the property, and FERC is not requiring him to get that property back. It's
Okay.
unbelievable. And this
Okay.
has went on for years.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I know the county controller fairly well. Our kids are in 4-H together, Bridget. Very emotional issue too. I mean, and I don't understand really why you don't pay your taxes, but the IRS will find you. I'm sorry, we had a question over here again. Okay, and we'll get right to you. Okay, sir, go ahead.
One other thing Boyce is currently doing is they are now currently asking FERC to give them an agreement to put in new power generators. And they're going to pay for that evidently, but they're not going to pay for work on the dam. They're hiding money in many different areas.
Aren't they, in fact, trying to incorporate the request for the turbine improvements as part of the project?
It should not be, because the
I understand.
project is not for power generation.
Right.
No. In the latest FERC report, I just read the last concluded paragraph, and it says in there, that it talks about the power generation. They have submitted a proposal, as you said, about power generation.
I actually have the estimates that Durace has done, and on that piece, and I need to do a little bit more investigating on it too, but on that piece is strictly what he's asking for. Part of this $8 million is strictly the lowering the dam. It has nothing to do with the power generation.
Yeah, but the power generation is a separate issue, and I think we could probably, what maybe for the next time is we could do it.
It's not a question of whether it's a separate issue. It's a question of he has money that he's not willing to cough up for some of his projects. He wants to improve his finances.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that has not been brought up here is it sounds like everybody's willing to cash in on this guy. The question becomes, are you willing to cash in, or are we willing to go like Wiggins Lake and own the dam? Maybe it's not a power producer, but we could own a dam.
Well, and I think,
and then we get rid of this guy.
Yeah, I think I think your point's well taken. I mean, we as a community have to figure out what we want to do.
I agree, but I think all these things need to be brought up. I don't think we should be talking only about supporting them with our money.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think we're at that point yet. I mean, I'm not.
The other thing you have to realize is if you support that kind of cash, you have to have somebody that has full financial disclosure, or else passing out the cash. It cannot go to Boyce Hydro.
No, well, we learned that right with Pete's comments that, we couldn't do that. I mean, legally we can't do that. We also can't use the municipal credit to roll somebody. It's just, it's not appropriate by statute, correct? Am I summarizing that correctly? Pete's nodding his head, I get junior lawyer status today. Good comments, though, appreciate that. We had a gentleman, you had a comment, I think this gentleman in the black jacket, and you both had a comment. If you'd like to go ahead.
I hear a lot of talk about mandatory assessments.
Yep.
I don't see $8 million in this room here.
No, I got $12 in my purse.
Nobody can afford it.
No.
Taxes are high enough. We are coming, our channel is coming off of the end of the Payne Creek dredging,
Yeah,
which was a botched job.
yeah.
And I'd say no to any assessments to give to a private individual or company that obviously has some ill reputation, you know what I'm trying to say, reputation.
It's got a little bit of a poor reputation in the
Yes.
community, right,
No.
okay.
They
I
had the
think
money
too.
2 years ago, and now all of a sudden they kind of lost the money? What a wow.
I think that, you know, before we get to opening our checkbooks, we gotta exhaust all other opportunities. I would absolutely agree with you. Sir, did you have a comment? Okay, ma'am?
It's my understanding that DTE just signed a contract with Boyce Hydro for 7 years. They obviously have a consumer's energy
Yeah, they do,
contract,
yeah.
but they now have a 7-year DTE contract to
Yeah,
sell power.
I don't know, it's because he talked to us, Greg, and about power, okay? Because apparently there's not parity between his power rates and the city of Beaverton's power rates. He's lower. Now, I haven't run down my buddy at Consumers yet to really get the real scoop on this, but I believe that there is some issue with him selling power back to DTE, and I don't know about that. I don't know if anybody in the room, wait a minute. Here's our expert.
Kilowatt hours of electricity to consumers' energy.
He's selling to consumers?
We could argue that he made a bad deal because he's selling it too cheap.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
He's also selling what are called the renewable energy credits. Because it's a hydro dam, for every kilowatt hour that gets generated, there's a renewable energy credit that is also a product that he can sell to the utilities to meet the renewable standards that the state set in its 2008 legislation. That's what he's selling to DTE.
So he's selling the renewable.
Okay. Electricity and the rest.
So if he had windmills, he'd be doing the same thing, right? Gotcha. Okay, everybody clear on that?
Thank you.
All right, great, thanks for the question.
It's a little bit different because hydropower isn't green energy, so they don't get the extra money, but because he has an existing contract with consumers, he couldn't get that extra money, but if he gets a new contract with DTE,
he can get it.
He'll get the extra.
Okay, he needs to go into windmills, I hear there's better money in those. Okay, yeah, one other comment over here? Yes, sir. Sure, another question.
The viability of what he can and can't do could be determined fairly easily. If we get it done in Braddock, and just look at what kind of net income the guy makes, it's gonna be a real quick answer. Can you afford it or can't you?
Yeah,
Because if you can't afford it, then you gotta have a whole different direction that we take.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think part of the problem is you can only, you know, it's not, we can only get parts and pieces of that. I think that, but I think you're correct. I mean, you know.
Anybody that's a member of Dun and Braddock, all we need to know is what kind of net income that the guy makes.
Yeah.
If he's only netting $200,000 a year,
From what no, he can't. From what we've been able to piece together with the guys at Sanford.
You're hitting it, that's about it.
Yeah, he's about right. His net is about 200,000 a year, if that. Now,
that's what I'm guessing from
yeah,
what I saw.
Just by, go ahead.
Is that on the dam?
You mean the Eville Dam or?
No, on the Wixom Lake Dam. There's 2 pieces of property there, isn't there? There's the land, and he pays rent to the land, so you got 2 corporations.
So this isn't gonna be
not just one, you gotta look at both.
that people wanna hear, but if I made $200,000 a year, there's no way I'd consider an $8 million investment.
No, because
it's not even feasible.
Because his debt service.
So we need to be looking in a whole different direction.
Yeah, his debt service is pretty large. His debt service is pretty large. Okay, he has no equity in these dams. Okay, all of us have homes, we have equity in them, right? We get that. But this guy doesn't. He doesn't make enough money. He doesn't have any equity in his dams to borrow against because his debt service is already way out of whack.
He might have a ton of money in the bank, who knows?
We don't
But the bottom line is, they can't, the project can't.
You got one more comment, and then I see some people are kind of leaving. I would like to try to wrap up because I know we've all had long days. So go ahead.
I'm old, so I forget a lot of this stuff, but I'll go back and try and catch what I can. I'm Bob Evans, Gladden County Drain Commissioner.
Oh, hi.
And
thanks for coming.
Wixom Lake Board, the Jim, and the rest of the folks here. But Greg, I think you talked about there being 4 times larger storm than the 1986 storm.
A lot of water's gotta flow through.
It's a lot more than that. It's the 1986 storm was a 50-year flood, Our study right now for our FEMA project is a 100-year flood, and this is a 10,000-year flood.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a Noah's Ark on steroids.
But it doesn't sound like we can change that.
Yeah.
I mean, those FERC things are carved in stone. We aren't gonna have a change.
And I usually follow Jim up, but Jim always gives the bad side. I follow up with the good side. He saved Gladwin County residents over $6 million a year with this FEMA project.
Yeah.
And it was a big chunk for him to do, and it's really helped us. And so I'm seeing a different side from what Jim sees, but he's also a businessman, and he pointed out here, you don't have to check these credentials on dollars. He can't afford an $8 million project, and it's a project that's being forced on him. So I think our anger is going in the wrong way. Our anger needs to go to Washington. Everyone needs to sit down tonight and write a letter to their congresspeople and say, don't.
No, I would agree with you. I think though, before you go do that, let's coordinate on what we're gonna say. Please, okay. I want to just cover two other topics. Larry and I have talked a little bit offline, and we have not talked with the larger Wixom Lake board. I know a lot of them are still sunning in Florida, which I'm really happy for them. Not really. Okay. We need to, I think, from my opinion, and the only reason I started doing this is because, frankly, what's going on, I don't know. And I appreciate everybody turning out. It's just very flattering that, somebody sends out an email and then the next thing you know, 125, 130 people show up to start talking about a really important issue. But I think it would be to our benefit, and I'm not sure how the rest of the room feels, but to get a focused group of people, maybe, 6 to 10 folks who are willing to really put some time in on this and start charting a path forward on this for us. So, I would suggest that if anybody's interested in doing that, could you kind of hang out a little bit after the meeting? And we'd like to, obviously get that group chartered from the Wixom Lake Association so we all speak as one, rather than speaking as 12 or 15 different factions. So if you have interest in that, if you could just stay with us for a few minutes and maybe we can kind of get that core group that, people together who really want to put some energy into this. And I'm going to tell you, from my personal perspective, I spend easily, 8 to 10 hours a week sometimes. Not last week because I was gone, but you do spend a lot of time learning on this. Highly encourage everybody to do that. We have tentatively set, Brian and our cherished supervisor in the back, another meeting for April 18th. I just picked that date. It was like the third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. If that is okay, and I got the nod from the back of the room, is that okay? We will continue this dialogue and continue to bring you information as we move forward. I'd ask, I think everybody got a sheet for Wixom Lake Association. Please join. Larry wants 100 new applicants. And then the other thing is that I gave everybody a sheet for your name and your address, and down on the bottom there's two sections that said, hey, what did we talk about tonight that you maybe didn't fully understand, and what other questions might you have? What other topics would you like to learn about or discuss? We really need input to understand what we need to go kind of figure out. We'll start talking about strategy next time, and then we'll also start things like an FAQ document, key information points, so that we have that stuff that we talked about here documented and we can have it available for people. Before we kind of close, is there any other final comments from anybody? Oh, we got a couple over here. Yes. Okay, yes, sir.
Remember, all this discussion is also kind of all gone around estimates of $8 million, and those estimates are all on designs and projects derived by Mr. Mueller. So the question then becomes also is, can a $4 million dam do the same thing? That's one of the issues with his designs. Nobody else is, they've approved the designs are adequate, but nobody's asked whether the designs are over-adequate.
Right, and again, that was my comment earlier about do we want to, and this costs money, go back and have an engineer look at it and say, you know what, we could do this and it'd get us the same answer.
I don't know if we can afford that, but I think it's good questions that maybe Mr. Mueller needs to speak up to.
Good.
I know you said his comments and his communications are bad. We spent a couple hours with him.
Yeah.
And his communications, and I explained the same thing. I said, you're on a bad end from what you've done on Sanford Lake. I said, you've got zero communications coming out to this group on Wixom Lake. I said, the first thing you need to do, and I suggested working with the Lake Association to try to use their website to try to get some of this information out. And I have seen zero.
Well, and that's why we're here. We're taking charge. I come from a good Polish family. If you want something done, you do it yourself. Okay, I appreciate everybody coming. Rob, I'm sorry, do you have one more comment?
I just have one more thought. There's some comments made about, well, let's let him lose his FERC license.
Yeah, everybody hearing that? Okay, FERC license?
Can't hear you.
Lose the FERC license and maybe, even the township take over the dam. I think what we have to recognize is, even if that course of action takes place, the repairs still need to be made.
Yeah,
So then the township's still gonna have to make an assessment, and then you're gonna have to take over normal repairs, because you no longer have a revenue source, you selling the electricity off of it as well.
Yeah.
So I think either course of action, you're either gonna have to, find a way to fund it through a private entity, or we fund it through a public entity that owns it.
Right,
Also,
good.
keep in mind, right now, the
Okay.
dams,
For instance, if county requires dams, the dam is all under state of Michigan.